when my husband Arthur passed away. I never imagined the real nightmare was just beginning. Looking at my daughter-in-law Jessica's face, I understood the true meaning of hatred. "This house is mine now," she declared with an icy smile, throwing my suitcases onto the curb. "Why don't you go to a nursing home?" I said nothing. I just smiled. She had no idea I possessed a secret that would change everything. The $2 million Arthur had left exclusively for me, along with our beach house in Naples, Florida, that she never even dreamed existed. Arthur's casket lowered slowly into the cold earth that rainy September morning. After 38 years of marriage, he departed with the same serenity he'd lived with, leaving only silence and a void that seemed to fill every atom of my being. We had weathered so many storms together, but this one I would have to face alone. As the last mourners scattered from the cemetery, I felt a hand touch my shoulder. It was Michael, our only son. "Mom, let's go home. You need to rest." I nodded silently, unable to transform the whirlwind of emotions consuming me into words. Beside me, Jessica, my daughter-in-law, remained unmoved. There wasn't a single tear in her eyes, no sign of grief on her face, just a calculating gaze that scanned every person present, as if she were tallying who might prove useful in the future. During the drive back, the silence in the car was broken only by the sound of rain hitting the windshield. Michael drove while Jessica constantly checked her phone. Not a single word was spoken. The house that Arthur and I had built together in Chicago, where we'd raised our son and planted our dreams, now seemed like a foreign place. It was as if all the memories had been swept away along with my husband's soul. When we arrived, I noticed something strange at the garage entrance. My 3 suitcases, the ones I had packed to stay a few days at Michael's house after the burial, were piled up near the entrance, exposed to the drizzle that continued to fall. "What does this mean?" I asked, my voice thick with exhaustion. Jessica shrugged and offered a cold smile. "I thought you understood. Now that Arthur is gone, things are going to change." Michael stared at the floor, avoiding my gaze. I felt a chill run down my spine. "Son, what does your wife mean by this?" My voice came out almost as a whisper. It's temporary, Mom," he stammered. "Jessica thinks it would be better if you stayed somewhere else." Before I could process what was happening, Jessica stepped forward. Her expensive perfume invaded my nostrils as she drew close. "From now on, this house is mine," she declared with firmness that left me stunned. "You can go to a nursing home. It would be more convenient for everyone." The cruelty of those words hit me like a punch to the stomach. I looked at Michael, waiting for him to defend me, to say something, anything. But he remained silent, like a shadow of himself, dominated by this woman I'd never truly known. I took a deep breath. There were no tears to cry. The shock gave way to a strange calm, as if a part of me had disconnected from reality. "I understand," I replied simply. I took my suitcases and carried them to the small utility room at the back of the property, a place Arthur had used as a tool shed. The smell of dampness and mold filled my nostrils. A small makeshift bed had been placed in a corner next to an old table where a dog bowl rested. The message was clear. I was worth less than a pet to them. I sat on the edge of that hard bed and looked around, the walls stained with dampness, the small window that barely let in daylight. This would be my new home. I didn't let the tears fall, although they threatened to overflow at any moment. Arthur had always said that in moments of greatest pain, silence was our best defense. "When they think you're defeated, Helen, that's when you must conserve your strength," he used to tell me. The right silence is your most powerful weapon. As the night wore on, I sat in that damp room, remembering every detail of my life with Arthur, the generous, prudent man who always planned everything, who took care of every detail, even for when he was no longer here. What Jessica and Michael didn't know was that Arthur, in his quiet wisdom, had protected me. Before his illness worsened, he transferred all our most valuable assets to my name, a beach house in Naples, Florida that few knew existed, shares in profitable companies, accounts overseas. In total, about $2 million. I looked at the locket I wore around my neck, a gift from Arthur on our last wedding anniversary. Inside it, A small compartment held the key to the safe where all the documents were secured. A faint smile formed on my lips as the rain continued to fall outside. Jessica thought I was just a helpless, disposable widow. She had no idea who I really was or what was coming. That night, I couldn't sleep. The sound of rain on the tin roof marked the hours like a relentless metronome. I spent the early morning planning every step I would take from now on, not for revenge, but for justice, for respect for Arthur's memory, and mainly for myself. When dawn broke, I heard Jessica's footsteps upstairs. The clinking of cups and the aroma of fresh coffee wafted down to my small room, reminding me that I would soon be summoned for my new duties in the house that was once mine. I got ready as best I could with the few clothes I had in my suitcases. I combed my gray hair and looked at the broken mirror hanging on the wall. At 63, my face bore the marks of a lifetime, but my eyes still shone with quiet determination. "The game starts today, Arthur," I whispered into the void. "And you taught me how to play." When I went upstairs and entered the kitchen, Jessica was already sitting at the table, tapping on her tablet. She barely looked up when I entered. "Ah, you're here. Breakfast must be served at 7 sharp. Michael wants scrambled eggs with bacon, and the kids prefer pancakes. I just want a fruit salad and a green juice." I didn't answer. I simply put on the apron that was hanging near the stove and began to prepare what she'd requested. While I cut the fruit, I watched Jessica out of the corner of my eye. She seemed all too comfortable in the role of lady of the house, as if she'd rehearsed this moment for years. The children, Dylan and Jenna, came down for breakfast, still sleepy. Jenna, at 10 years old, hugged me shyly. "Grandma, why are you in the kitchen making food?" Before I could answer, Jessica intervened. "Grandma is going to help us more around the house now. Isn't that great? That way you can see her every day." The girl looked confused while Dylan just shrugged and focused on his phone. Michael appeared right after, dressed for work, avoiding eye contact with me. "Good morning," he said, kissing the children's foreheads and Jessica's lips. I served breakfast in silence, observing every movement, every interaction. No one invited me to sit at the table. I stood near the counter like an employee waiting for new orders. "The children need to be ready for school in 20 minutes, Jessica announced, getting up. "And you can start cleaning the house after they leave. Oh, and don't forget to feed the dogs." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. Jessica came closer, lowering her voice so only I could hear. "You should be grateful I'm letting you stay here. Many mothers-in-law don't have that luck." When everyone left, I remained alone in that kitchen which, until a few days ago, was the heart of my home. I cleared the table, washed the dishes, and organized everything meticulously. Every movement was executed with calculated calm, as if I were simply watching myself from the outside. While sweeping the living room floor, my eyes landed on the photograph that still held a prominent place on the shelf. Arthur and I embracing in front of the See the Day we bought our beach house in Naples, a property Jessica knew nothing about. In that moment, I decided I needed to act intelligently, wait for the right moment, observe every move, every habit, every weakness, and above all, understand what was really happening in that house. Over the next week, I adapted to the new routine. I got up before everyone, prepared breakfast, cleaned the house, washed and ironed the clothes. Jessica never missed an opportunity to humiliate me with little comments or unnecessary orders. "Helen, you forgot to clean under the sofa. How careless. This plate still has a stain. Are you losing your sight?" Michael, for his part, seemed more and more distant. He came home late from work, always with a worried look. I tried to talk to him several times, but he always changed the subject or claimed to be busy. It was on one of those nights, when everyone had already gone to bed, that I decided to investigate Arthur's office. The place was exactly as he had left it. The books lined up on the shelf, the old leather armchair where he spent hours reading, the solid oak desk we'd bought together on our 10th wedding anniversary. Carefully, I opened the desk drawer where Arthur kept important documents. It was empty. All the folders, contracts, and papers had disappeared. I felt a chill down my back. Someone had gone through everything. I continued my silent search. At the back of the bookshelf, behind a row of books, I found what I was looking for, the small safe that Arthur had installed years ago, known only to the two of us. Using the key I kept in my locket, I opened it with trembling hands. Inside, I found the original documents for all our properties, including the beach house, in addition to the will Arthur had made leaving me as the sole beneficiary. There was also an envelope addressed to me in my husband's unmistakable handwriting. My dearest Helen, if you are reading this letter, it means I am no longer by your side. Forgive me for that. I promise we will be together until the end, but life has its own plans. For all these years, I have watched with concern the changes in our son. The kind man we raised seems to have gotten lost under Jessica's influence. I fear that when I am gone, they will try to take advantage of you, of your goodness, your gentleness. That is why I took measures. I transferred everything we built together into your name. Our lawyer, Mr. George Stevens, has all the instructions. Look for him when you think it's necessary. Do not let them take your dignity, my love. You have always been stronger than you think. With all my love, forever, Arthur. Silent tears streamed down my face as I held the letter to my chest. Arthur had always known. He had always protected me, even knowing he wouldn't be here. I carefully placed everything back in the safe, except for a copy of the most important documents, which I kept in my purse. I returned to my little room in the shed with a new feeling growing inside me. Determination. The next morning, when Jessica handed me an even longer list of household chores than usual, I just smiled and nodded. "Is there a problem, Helen?" she asked, suspicious of my sudden docility. "None," I replied calmly. "I'm just adapting to my new reality." She smiled, satisfied with what she interpreted as submission. Little did she know that while I cleaned the house and tended to the chores, I was observing every move, every whispered conversation on the phone, every document that passed through her hands. I began to notice a pattern. Every Tuesday afternoon, Jessica would leave saying she was going to salon, but she would return with no apparent change. On Thursdays, Michael stayed late at the office, claiming extra work. Both seemed worried about money despite the luxurious lifestyle they maintained. One night, while serving dinner, I heard Jessica comment to Michael, "We need to resolve that matter of the land in Miami. The buyer is getting impatient." Michael looked tense. "We can't sell something that isn't legally ours." Jessica lowered her voice, but I could still hear her. "Your father is dead. Who is going to challenge it?" I pretended not to have heard, but my heart raced. They were planning to sell properties that now belonged to me without my knowledge or consent. That night, after everyone went to sleep, I made a call from my old cell phone, one Jessica considered too useless to bother checking. "Mr. George Stevens, this is Helen, Arthur's wife. We need to talk urgently." Mr. George Stevens' office was exactly as I remembered it. Shelves full of law books, the smell of fresh coffee, and that aura of discretion that always made me feel safe. At 72, the lawyer still maintained the same elegant posture and sharp gaze that inspired confidence. "Mrs. Helen, my deepest condolences for Arthur," he said, squeezing my hand between his. "A loyal friend, a man of integrity, an irreparable loss." I sat in the leather armchair in front of his desk, my hands trembling slightly as I opened my purse to take out the documents I had found. "George, I need to understand exactly what my current situation is," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "And I need your complete discretion." The lawyer adjusted his glasses and examined each paper I placed in front of him. His face remained impassive, but I noticed a slight furrow in his brow as he read. "Arthur was extremely meticulous, as always," he commented after a few minutes. "He transferred all the main assets to your name before his condition worsened. The house where you live, the property in Naples, the financial investments, everything is legally in your name." "And what about the rest?" I asked, remembering Jessica's mentions of land. In the following days, I continued my apparently submissive routine, while gathering information through recordings and accidentally overheard conversations. The picture that was forming was alarming. Jessica and Michael were planning to sell several properties that now belonged to me, forging documents with the help of Richard, who was clearly not just an agent but an accomplice in this scheme. One afternoon, while cleaning the couple's room, a task Jessica insisted on assigning me, probably to remind me that this space, once mine, now belonged to her. I found something that confirmed my suspicions. A folder containing falsified copies of property transfer documents with my forged signature. With trembling hands, I photographed everything with my cell phone and immediately sent the images to George. His response was quick. "This is evidence of crime. We can act now." "Not yet," I replied. "I want to see how far they'll go." The opportunity to discover more came in the form of a dinner party Jessica organized at the house. Among the guests were Richard and his wife, as well as a man who was introduced as Charles Vance, a potential buyer of family investments. During dinner, I served the dishes and discreetly observed the interactions. Charles seemed like a successful businessman, the kind who doesn't ask many questions when a deal looks too good. "So, Michael, when can we finalize the transaction for the Miami land?" he asked as I was pouring the wine. "My investors are anxious." Jessica intervened with her most charming smile. "We're just waiting for some final signatures. You know how bureaucracy is." When I returned to the kitchen to get dessert, I heard Jessica whisper to Michael, "He's offering $500,000. We need to close this before the old woman realizes anything." That night, I couldn't sleep. The confirmation of their criminal intentions was there, recorded on audio and witnessed by me. But one piece of the puzzle was still missing. How involved was Michael? Was he an active perpetrator, or just manipulated by Jessica? The next morning, I decided to take a risk. While Jessica was in the shower, I knocked gently on the office door, where Michael was working on his laptop. "Son, can I talk to you for a minute?" I asked, keeping my voice low. Michael seemed surprised and a bit uncomfortable. "Now is not a good time, Mom. I'm busy." "It's about the land in Miami," I said directly, watching his reaction. His face turned pale instantly. What land?" "The land that you and Jessica are planning to sell to Charles Vance." Michael stood up abruptly, looking towards the door to make sure no one was listening. "How do you know that? You shouldn't know about that." "I know a lot more than you imagine, son," I replied calmly. "I know about the forged documents, about the plans to sell properties that don't belong to you." He ran a hand over his face, suddenly looking aged and defeated. "Mom, you don't understand. We have serious financial problems. Jessica, she has debts you can't imagine. And the solution is to commit crimes? To forge my signature? To treat me like a burden to be discarded in a nursing home?" He didn't answer. He just sank into the chair, avoiding my gaze. "Michael, look at me," I asked, feeling a mix of sadness and disappointment. "Your father raised you better than that. He always made everything easy for you," Michael muttered, a trace of resentment in his voice. "He left everything to you without thinking about me, about my children. Is that what Jessica told you?" I asked, surprised by his distorted perception. "Michael, your father secured your future in other ways. The children's education fund, the seed money for your company. He just wanted to protect me, knowing I'd be alone. Jessica says you're too old to manage so much money that will eventually end up in our hands anyway." The coldness of that statement hit me like a blade. So that was it. Were they just waiting for me to die? Or perhaps speeding up the process by forcing me to live in deplorable conditions? Before I could respond, we heard Jessica's footsteps approaching the office. Quickly, I changed my expression and my tone of voice. "So, son, think about what we discussed regarding that flan recipe. Your kids will love it," I said with forced smile as Jessica entered. She looked at us suspiciously. "What are you two whispering about?" "My mother was just asking me to buy some ingredients for a dessert she wants to make for the kids," Michael replied quickly. Jessica smiled, but her eyes remained cold. "How sweet of her. But you don't have time for shopping now, Michael. We have that meeting with Richard in an hour." As I left the office, I felt Jessica's gaze piercing my back. She knew something was up, and that made her even more dangerous. "There are some properties that remain in Arthur's name, but his will is clear. You are the universal beneficiary." He took a folder from his drawer. "Here is a copy of the will, already registered with the notary. No one can contest it." A momentary relief washed over me, but it was soon replaced by a new worry. And what if they try to sell something without my consent? George took off his glasses and looked me directly in the eyes. Helen, if they try to carry out any transaction with properties that are legally in your name, they will be committing a crime. Forgery, fraud. He paused. Is there any evidence that they are planning something like that? I told him about the conversation I had overheard and about my current situation in the house. The lawyer's eyes hardened. What they are doing to you is unacceptable. We could take legal action immediately to... I raised my hand, interrupting him gently. Not yet, George. I want to fully understand what is happening before taking any action. What do you plan to do then? He asked, intrigued. Observe, document, and when the time is right, act. I took a deep breath. But I need your help with a few things. I left the office 2 hours later with a well-defined plan and a sense of empowerment I hadn't felt in weeks. George had helped me understand exactly my rights and the measures we could take when necessary. Before returning home, I made a stop at a small electronics store where I bought 2 discrete recording devices and a minuscule camera that could be easily hidden. I wasn't proud of having to resort to such methods, but I needed concrete proof to protect myself. When I returned, I found the house empty except for Jenna, who was sitting on the porch reading a book. Her face lit up when she saw me. Grandma, where were you? Mom got mad when she couldn't find you to make lunch. I sat down next to her, touching her dark hair, so similar to Arthur's when he was young. I had to take care of some things, dear. Grown-up stuff. Jenna lowered her voice, looking around as if afraid of being heard. Mom said you're going to a special place for old people soon. Is that true, Grandma? I felt my heart shrink. And what do you think about that, Jenna? Her eyes filled with tears. I don't want you to go. I already lost Grandpa. I hugged her tightly, feeling her small head rest on my shoulder. Don't worry, dear. I'm not going anywhere. Later, when Jessica returned with Dylan, she barely contained her irritation at seeing me. Where were you? I had to order food because you weren't here to make lunch. I went to the doctor. I lied naturally. I have that routine checkup every month, remember? Jessica frowned, but didn't question further. She probably didn't even bother to remember my medical appointments. Well, now that you're here, you can serve dinner at 7 tonight. Michael is bringing an important guest. That evening, I prepared an elaborate dinner like in the old days when Arthur and I hosted friends. Michael's guest was a middle-aged man named Richard Miller, who introduced himself as a real estate agent. Throughout the meal, I noticed significant glances exchanged between him, Michael, and Jessica. So, Michael, Richard commented as he savored the dessert I prepared, is that land in Miami still available? Michael shot a nervous glance in my direction before answering. We're finalizing some details. Everything will be resolved soon. After the guests left, I waited for everyone to fall asleep to put my plan into action. Carefully, I placed one of the recording devices in the living room and another in the office where Jessica and Michael used to have their most private conversations. The next morning, while preparing coffee, I noticed Jessica on the phone speaking in a low voice on the porch. Yes, the land in Miami. No, she doesn't know anything. It's just a matter of time until we resolve the paperwork. My heart raced. The land in Miami was an investment Arthur had made years ago. According to the documents I'd found, it had been transferred to my name shortly before his illness worsened. In the following days, I continued my apparently submissive routine while gathering information to the recordings and accidentally overheard conversations. The picture that was forming was alarming. Jessica and Michael were planning to sell several properties that now belonged to me, forging documents with the help of Richard, who was clearly not just an agent but an accomplice in this scheme. One afternoon, while cleaning the couple's room, a task Jessica insisted on assigning me, probably to remind me that this space, once mine, now belonged to her, I found something that confirmed my suspicions, a folder containing falsified copies of property transfer documents with my forged signature. With trembling hands, I photographed everything with my cell phone and immediately sent the images to George. His response was quick. This is evidence of a crime. We can act now. Not yet, I replied. I want to see how far they'll go. The opportunity to discover more came in the form of a dinner party Jessica organized at the house. Among the guests were Richard and his wife, as well as a man who was introduced as Charles Vance, a potential buyer of family investments. During dinner, I served the dishes and discreetly observed the interactions. Charles seemed like a successful businessman, the kind who doesn't ask many questions when a deal looks too good. "So, Michael, when can we finalize the transaction for Miami land?" he asked as I was pouring the wine. "My investors are anxious." Jessica intervened with her most charming smile. "We're just waiting for some final signatures. You know how bureaucracy is." When I returned to the kitchen to get dessert, I heard Jessica whisper to Michael, "He's offering $500,000. We need to close this before the old woman realizes anything." That night, I couldn't sleep. The confirmation of their criminal intentions was there, recorded on audio and witnessed by me. But one piece of the puzzle was still missing. How involved was Michael? Was he an active perpetrator, or just manipulated by Jessica? The next morning, I decided to take a risk. While Jessica was in the shower, I knocked gently on the office door, where Michael was working on his laptop. "Son, can I talk to you for a minute?" I asked, keeping my voice low. Michael seemed surprised and a bit uncomfortable. "Now is not a good time, Mom. I'm busy." "It's about the land in Miami," I said directly, watching his reaction. His face turned pale instantly. What land?" "The land that you and Jessica are planning to sell to Charles Vance." Michael stood up abruptly, looking towards the door to make sure no one was listening. "How you know that?" "You should know about that." "I know a lot more than you imagine, son," I replied calmly. "I know about the forged documents, about the plans to sell properties that don't belong to you." He ran a hand over his face, suddenly looking aged and defeated. "Mom, you don't understand. We have serious financial problems. Jessica, she has debts you can't imagine. And the solution is to commit crimes? To forge my signature? To treat me like a burden to be discarded in a nursing home?" He didn't answer. He just sank into the chair, avoiding my gaze. "Michael, look at me," I asked, feeling a mix of sadness and disappointment. "Your father raised you better than that. He always made everything easy for you," Michael muttered, a trace of resentment in his voice. "He left everything to you without thinking about me, about my children. Is that what Jessica told you?" I asked, surprised by his distorted perception. "Michael, your father secured your future in other ways. The Children's Education Fund, the seed money for your company. He just wanted to protect me, knowing I'd be alone. Jessica says you're too old to manage so much money that will eventually end up in our hands anyway." The coldness of that statement hit me like a blade. So that was it. Were they just waiting for me to die? Or perhaps speeding up the process by forcing me to live in deplorable conditions? Before I could respond, we heard Jessica's footsteps approaching the office. Quickly, I changed my expression and my tone of voice. "So, son, think about what we discussed regarding that flan recipe. Your kids will love it," I said with a forced smile as Jessica entered. She looked at us suspiciously. "What are you two whispering about?" "My mother was just asking me to buy some ingredients for a dessert she wants to make for the kids," Michael replied quickly. Jessica smiled, but her eyes remained cold. "How sweet of her. But you don't have time for shopping now, Michael. We have that meeting with Richard in an hour." As I left the office, I felt Jessica's gaze piercing my back. She knew something was up, and that made her even more dangerous. That afternoon, while everyone was out, I made a call to George. I explained the conversation I had with Michael and the confirmations I'd gotten about their intentions. "Helen, we now have enough evidence to take legal action," the lawyer affirmed. "We can request a court order to prevent any transaction with your properties and initiate criminal proceedings against Jessica and anyone else involved in the scheme." "And what about Michael?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Your son is implicated. Helen, even if he's just an accomplice by omission, he will have to answer for his actions." The thought of seeing my son face legal consequences for his mistakes broke my heart. Despite everything, he was still my son, the child I'd held in my arms, the one I'd taught to take his first steps. I need more time, George. I want to give Michael a chance to do the right thing. Time is running out. Helen, based on what you told me, they are about to finalize the sale of the Miami land. Just a few more days, I insisted. I have a plan. After hanging up, I sat on the small bed in the shed, contemplating my next move. I couldn't put it off any longer. It was time to confront not only Michael, but also Jessica with all the evidence I had collected. The next morning, I found an opportunity. When Jessica left for the salon, and the children were at school, Michael was alone in the office working on some documents that he quickly hid when I entered. "We need to talk, son. No interruptions, no excuses." He sighed, seeming resigned. "What do you want, Mom?" I placed an envelope on the table containing copies of all the legitimate property documents, along with photos of the forged documents I had found. "I want you to see what you are about to do," I said calmly, "and I want you to understand the consequences." Michael examined the papers, his face growing paler and paler. This is serious," he murmured, running his fingers over the documents. "How did you get all this?" "Your father taught me to always be prepared." I replied simply, "Michael, what you are doing is not just morally wrong. It's a crime. Forgery, attempted fraud, embezzlement." "It was Jessica's idea," he blurted out like a child trying to avoid blame. "She said it was just a matter of advancing the inheritance, that you didn't need all that money at your age. And you agreed to send me to a nursing home and treat me like an employee in my own house?" He looked down, unable to meet my gaze. "The debts, Mom. Jessica has huge debts that she was hiding from me. When I found out, it was already too late. The bank is threatening to take our house, the car. And the solution was to try to steal from your own mother?" I asked, feeling a deep pain in my chest. A heavy silence settled between us. Outside, the afternoon sun was beginning to set, casting a golden light through the office window, the same office where Arthur had spent hours planning our future, ensuring our security. "What are you going to do now?" Michael finally asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Are you going to report us to the police?" "It all depends on you," I replied firmly. "I have 2 conditions. First, you immediately cancel any negotiation for the sale of the properties. Second, Jessica needs to know the game is over. She will never accept that. Then you will have to choose Michael, your wife, or your freedom." At that moment, we heard the sound of the front door opening. Jessica was back. Michael quickly gathered the documents and hid them in the drawer. "Think about it carefully, son," I said in a low voice before leaving the office. "Tomorrow, I want your answer." That night was the longest of the last few weeks. Lying on the hard bed in the shed, I heard the sound from the main house. Ray's voices coming from Michael and Jessica's room. Doors slamming, hurried footsteps in the hallway. The storm was just beginning. In the morning, Jessica came down to breakfast with red eyes and a tense face. She completely ignored my presence as she poured herself coffee. Michael appeared minutes later, equally downcast. The children, sensing the tension, ate in unusual silence. "Kids, finish up. I don't want you to be late for school," Jessica ordered, her voice harsher than usual. As soon as Jen and Dylan left, Jessica turned to me, her eyes glittering with rage. "What are you plotting, you meddling old woman?"